Good day. Complex services create the most value and are the greatest source of differentiation in our advanced economies in a global world. Complex services to be differentiated from simple services such as getting a haircut, getting people to cut my grass. In these services, simple services, I feel totally comfortable that I know what's going on and I'm fully capable to assess and evaluate the work done by my service provider. Complex services, on the other hand, are characterized by a gap in knowledge. If I go to see a lawyer, an engineer, look at policeman work, look at the doctor's work, these are defined by this knowledge gap. I go to see someone who knows more than I do, and by definition, I am not in a position to fully understand what she or he is doing. Complex services include professional services, semi-professional services, and technical services. For a detailed understanding of the particular challenges involving these services, I recommend that you go on this site, complexservicedelivery.com, to see deploying the power of complex services. Foster, use, abuse of services like this. These 3 videos, it's a 3-part video really, that's available on this site, will give you a broad introduction. Here, I plan to give you an overview of the book. And I will do this in 3 parts. First, value and the customer experience. What is value? Who is the customer? What does she do exactly? The more I understand who she is, the better I understand what she does and what she needs, the better I can design an experience that will be memorable and that will create superior value. There is conceptual understanding here, and there are tools as well to help us manage this aspect. Once you understand this, what are you going to do to create the experience day in and day out without variation that destroy value? This is the process part of the book per se. And finally, put this in the global organizational perspective. Are you going to sustain your competitive advantage, knowing that you've got all sorts of competition out there, including out there, way out there in India, in Chile, who are trying to beat you at it? They also want that money, and they have much lower cost structure than we do as well. On Wednesday, February 15, 2007, at New York JFK Airport, an incident occurred. There was sleet falling, and many decisions had to be made by the carriers. Most carriers decided to cancel their flight. Not JetBlue. Tough decision in the fog of the crisis. Do we cancel and suffer all the consequence, or do we, on the contrary, make the right decision while our competitors are made bad decisions? If we can keep flying, we'll certainly get a great advantage here. They made the wrong decision because the sleet froze, and so did a number of planes stuck on the runway, fully loaded with people, for up to 12 hours. This is the first page of Business Week at the time. You can imagine the impact that this has on the reputation of an organization, a reputation that is very long and costly to build and sustain. How does this happen? Tough decision, incomplete information, doubts. But these catastrophes, in brackets, are not the product of a sole decision. They are the product of a series of decisions with many opportunities to actually do it right and correct the previous mistake. And these mistakes take place in a culture. JetBlue, in order to reduce costs, had made many decisions that made them less capable of making the right decision, for one thing, and two, to recuperate from a bad decision. Because the effect of this was system-wide for days, if not weeks, in terms of having the wrong aircraft at the wrong place, the wrong crews at the wrong place, and luggage lost all over the place, and being incapable of matching the three together again. They didn't have the right backup. From the Madoff affair to the Deepwater Horizon, to the space shuttle problem, to the subprime crisis. All of these major catastrophic failures occur as the result of a long build-up of good enough, small local effects that you let go because they don't have immediate consequences. I fear that there are many more such catastrophes waiting to happen. Potential failures accumulated in bubbles ready to burst. Fortunately, there are certainly many wows waiting to happen as well. Many situations where companies have built the right culture to face up to tough situation and to deliver value day in and day out. Thank goodness, failures are not the rule. There are many success stories out there. In the 1990s, Walgreens was a good company. They decided to become an excellent company. They worked on a simple idea. We will be the most convenient drugstore with high profit per customer visit. Simple enough? Well, the best organizations are built and survive with simple ideas. Those simple ideas can jump from one technological platform, from one environment to the next, seamlessly, through good, rigorous execution. This is the case of Walgreens. Their results are just fascinating, and I recommend the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, who illustrates many such organizations. This shareholder value ultimately is created by successful customer experiences, which in turn depends on the work of complex service workers. In this case, we're talking about the pharmacist, who, in doing his work, of course, depends on his employer, but also refers in his daily activities, in the way he manages the client, on his profession, what he's learned, and what he's obligated to do because of his code of conduct and because of his professional sense of ethic. In chapter 2 in the book, I discuss the notion of value in the specific context of complex services. Let's move on to this. Value, when the customer decides which way he's going, what he's going to buy. Is he going to the green store or the red store, the blue bank or the green bank? He weighs the quality of his experience and assesses the value he's going to get in both places. Let's discuss value. Value, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. Who's the customer exactly? If you only view your customers as an indiscriminate mass of people, you don't understand your customer. The first job you have to do is to understand who they are, obtain data, focus, and recognize that there's a bunch of different types of people with different needs, different expectations, not only difference in age, sex, and income, different in attitude and value system. The segmenting part is followed by the targeting part, involving an analysis of the potential and the current level of satisfaction of each market segment compared to your own strengths and weaknesses. And you target markets and you renounce to other market segments.
targeting is also renouncing. Trying to be all things to all people is a surefire recipe for failure, as some competitor will focus and will certainly be better on the targeted market segment than you are at trying to be all things to all people.
Let's take an example of a complex service. Hospital, cancer episode. Plenty of emotions in there, plenty of service providers, plenty of technicians, plenty of equipment involved. And certainly one of the most challenging episodes to manage correctly, ethically, in terms of meeting the customer need and meeting your shareholders' need at the same time. So there is suspicion that you have cancer. You meet the urgentologist and you walk through a corridor with GP visits, specialist visits, surgery eventually, follow-up medication and adjustments. Doctors meet specialists with GPs, specialists of various specialties, one among another, and at times the client is present at these meetings. I had the opportunity to be present when someone close to me had such an encounter with 4 specialists of different specialties discussing complex elements of which, as a patient, considering your knowledge and your emotional state, you are certainly not in a position to understand. Fortunately, I was standing aside and not being prey to the same emotions. I could make more sense of what was going on. But certainly, the episode, if you see it through the eye of the patient, was absolutely humanly awful. It may have been technically correct. In complex services, you've got to manage both. You cannot be just technically correct, nor can you just go with the emotions and be a nice person. You're also expected to do the right thing. As this is happening, of course, you go through various tests. The patient goes around in the hospital, here, there, all sorts of imaging techniques, all sorts of biopsies and analysis as you go through. So if you look now briefly at the operator's point of view and try to mesh the customer experience, this is a more or less typical hospital layout. You've got areas of customer coming in, examination room, admission, medical imaging technique, examination rooms, and so on.
The patient comes in and enters, goes to give information register. Time passes by, interaction, information produced about you going through the system, and you're coming back, waiting again. And there you go again to give some more information about you, meet people, produce information throughout the system, come back and wait. The path of the customer and what goes through his mind very much determines his experience. From a technical point of view, this path and the information produced and the people who analyze this information, the very specialized people in the way they intercommunicate and integrate this information in a diagnosis, a valid, data-based diagnosis, is critical. The two things must happen. And doing both is quite a challenge. Few organizations manage it well. Operationally, operations manager, of course, this has to be optimized, and there is a shareholder, and if it is not optimized, waiting will be worse. Idle equipment, and idle equipment is not producing value for anyone. So you got to measure throughput, day-by-day fluctuation, variation in throughput, data for each department, the X-ray, the CT scan, MRI, nuclear medicine, and so on. Measuring the right thing quickly and sending the information to the right place to process accurately with the right decisions in terms of allocating capacity and managing the flows in order to maximize value to the patient, to the shareholders, and to the personnel who derives personal value from all this. In this overview, as I do in the book, I switch from one complex service to another to show that the problems, the concepts, and the tools can be applied to any of them. And that is your interest to look at other sectors that you never looked at. You probably turn off when you hear something. If you're a doctor and you hear something about law firms, it's got nothing to do with me. Listen up. If you got the tools and the concepts to actually distill the right information from them, there is very much value to derive from their experience if you can adapt it. So let's switch to real estate. Back to the customer selling her house. Empty nest market segment. Kids are gone. I'd like to design a new house, sell the old house, build a new one, and celebrate with friends. This we call the customer corridor. And it is, at a high level view, the parallel of what we just saw. But we can zoom in. Let's look at now in detail at the sell house part of the customer corridor. Customer puts a sign, ads, visits, discussions, explanations, negotiation, deal, financial aspects, legal aspects, and things finalized. And throughout, there are needs. As you put the customer's shoes, if you really know who they are, baby boomers, kids are gone. If you pick a segment that's fairly well off financially, for example, you can fairly well imagine what they want at that point in time. The technique that I'm presenting here is drawing the customer corridor and walk through it, identifying the mental states, needs, emotions, preferences of that customer. To use this technique practically, if you can't draw like I can't, you use the simple technique of the sticky notes. Describe the cycle in words, and as you walk through, put on the needs and wants. There will be many. They're of different nature, but many are similar. So the next technique is to analyze the green sticky notes and try to distill customer needs from them, give them a name, and spell out what they are. So you take these green post-its and you use them through the next technique, which is an affinity diagram. You group the sticky notes by categories according to some sort of likeness criteria, as is happening here. Some may be related to time, like speed. Other may be related to the treatment, like courtesy, for example. You group these sticky notes and then you give them a name. Why did we put them together in the first place? For example, no surprise, prestige, VIP treatment, cleanliness, comfort, fix it. We will refer to these as critical to satisfaction, or CTS needs. They are not all equally important. We will try and assign weights to them to reflect the importance in the customer mind. Various segments will have various needs and will attach various degrees of importance to those needs. For example, imagine two market segments represented by Linda and Jack here, and this is an example from the book. Mike and Diane on the other side. The CTSs coming from the affinity diagram are alike in terms of results, quick deal, maximum net price, occupancy in 6 months. And then in terms of the experience itself, the service and the self-service experience. Service is when someone is helping me. Self-service is when I'm helping myself to something. I may or may not enjoy doing this, and that's part of my overall experience. You see in this illustration that Mike and Diane really, I would call them the Me Too segment. Houses are selling at high price, me too. I like to sell it too and do something else. I don't care about the rest really. This group here, the Linda and Jack type of segment, they value, of course they care about the price, but they are spread out in terms of, we don't want to move out in a hurry, don't want a too stressful experience. Understanding this to start with will help you design an experience that will beat competition in that market segment, give you competitive advantage. Of course, those are just a few words. What does low risk mean exactly? It is worthwhile to spell it out. I've got a lot of money at play here. I'm not willing to risk losing it or part of it because of fraud or technical problem to go a little faster. I'd rather sell at a lower price than take any risk at all. Well, that's a definition, and it's important that it reflects the emotion and the value system of the customer. Pleasant encounters. What does that mean exactly? Unless we define it, we certainly cannot produce it repetitively without variation. I like to show and talk about my property. I like visitors to respect my pride. I don't want to meet aggressive buyers and experience stress or bad vibes from these encounters. To some market segments, this does not even exist. To others, it may be fundamental as you design your experience. We start then by designing a process from the customer in. And at the customer level, we segment, we discriminate, and we pick and choose as much as we can where there are opportunities to be had for us, considering our strengths and weaknesses. Let us now zoom out and conceptualize to present the model that's in the book in chapter 2. We've talked about the customer. We start with the customer, we go in to what we're going to do. And I've talked as well about the employee. What is he going to do? And we should consider what he's going to get out of it as well. Value has to be in the eye of the beholder from the customer side, but personal value has to be considered. You can't get one without the other. So conceptually, we position ourselves in the market and we position ourselves in the labor market. We start from the customer and we go inside the organization toward the actual delivery of the experience. Let's modelize this. Positioning in the market, positioning in the labor market. Outside the organization, inside the organization. I mentioned the customer corridor. Who is he? What does he do? In the previous slide, we discussed the customer activity cycle. This is what you have here, customer activities. And the needs, where there were the green sticky notes, are the needs. We distill this to understand what exactly constitutes service quality, and we formulate it at length, as illustrated in the previous slide. And we also have to take into account the price, because value is the ratio of my satisfaction, service quality, divided by the price, of course. And that's where customers decide on the basis of maximum value from what provider they should get services. So our positioning involves targeting the right market and then developing the right service concept. A service concept is the customer benefit package, together with the service features that will deliver. So imagine that you're looking at a full service real estate agent, we do everything for you, including, for example, as a benefit, convenience, ease. You tell us when your house is available, you leave us the key, we guarantee everything, insurance. You'll never notice that someone came by. We do everything. The convenience is the benefit, and the visit organization and logistic is the feature of the service. Behind it, there is the process of setting these appointments and taking insurance. There are many processes involved in order to deliver that value to the customer. We formulate the value proposition in a way to distill from this benefit package the essential element that will lock it for the customer. That this is for me. They are different from the others, and what they're offering is mine. This is the value proposition. Now, the mirror image involves looking at the inside of the organization and now thinking of the broker. What kind of life? What kind of personal value? Who is he? What does he do exactly? Does he have a family? Does he like to work at night, weekends, to be called at any time, day and night? What does he do is the job activity, and it is the employee's activity cycle or corridor. As he walks through there, he's got needs and preferences, and from which we can distill what is job quality and what is value to this person. What is value to one person is non-value for another. So what we need here, and you see the notion of mirror image, is a job concept, which is an employee benefit package as well as job features. The parallel here is perfect, and there are processes below to deliver this value to our employee regularly, on a regular basis. These two concepts, the service concept, the job concept, must be determined. Of course, there is the personal value proposition that stems from the job concept. Those two must be thought together, because an unhappy employee will not create a memorable service experience. An unhappy real estate agent doesn't want to be bothered, doesn't like phone call, and we promise the customer that we would not miss an appointment because the agent is not available. Well, there are consequences to that. So it has to be win-win. The job concept's got to be well positioned on the right people, keep them happy, reduce turnover rate. It cannot be win-lose for very long. And we must also deliver value to the shareholder as well. In a nutshell, this is the conceptual model presented in Chapter 2. And in a later chapter, I move on to processes. Once you've positioned yourself, once you are logically in a position to create superior value, sustainable superior value, how do you make sure it happens without flaws? Those are the processes, the chain of action performed by employees together that create superior value. This will be the section of part 2 of the video where we'll zoom in. Who does what in this organization? This is back to the pharmacy example here. You'd have the technicians, the pharmacist herself, the facilities, the customer, and we'll call this a process mapping. As the customer walks through the process, we will describe zoom in value. Who does what exactly? How long does it take? This zoom in is essential to focus on the critical to process activities, to isolate those few activities in the moment of truth that are critical to delivering sustainable value. You cannot do this, it is useless to do this, unless you've done the previous part. Understand the customer, understand his or her experience. Then you can zoom in and start understanding what you have to do and what sort of measurement you need to make sure it's happening and what sort of process control you will need as well. Now, here are some takeaway notions from this first part of the three-part video. Quality in complex services involves leadership. This is not the fast food business where you give the customer what he asks for. Here, you lead the customer to understand what she needs. Understanding who the customer is and what he does is even more important in complex services. He is co-producing the outcome. If he does not understand his part, if you don't lead him to do his part, the outcome will not be achieved. Whoever produces a customer experience lives an experience herself. Only positive experiences on both sides of the encounter are sustainable.